Hey, it's Soul, here to give some targeted feedback on what is coming in patch 9.1, and today I'm going to ramble and rant about Korthia. Like, what is there to do in Korthia, how does it work, who is the target audience, and how much of my life is this going to take up, because despite not really being the target audience, I'm going to do it anyway. Like my earlier feedback pieces, this is by its nature, it's just me talking about my experience and biased viewpoints and assumptions. I'm going to see things and react. I'm going to try and understand what I'm going to do and what my routine in Korthia is going to be going live. And then I'll touch on it more broadly, like who the target audience is and that sort of thing. And I think I just said the same thing twice. Let's just get started. We're introduced to Korthia pretty early in the 9.1 experience. I mean, obviously, we just kind of get shoved into there, and at the moment, almost immediately, we can start progressing and checking stuff out. Dailies just sort of slap you in the face like, boom, here you go. And there are rares to kill, which are mostly in the same flavor of what you've expected over the past couple of expansions. There are treasures, some of them are on annoying-ass branches that you gotta climb. There are some that need to be unlocked, and right now, they do have loot inside of them, but I haven't got anything more than like vendor trash and greens and anima and relic fragments. I'm gonna talk a lot more on that later. And the same goes for the rares. There are also these kinds of rifts that I think you put in, that I think they put you in a different phase for a couple minutes, and then you fight more bad guys. And you know, that sounds pretty cool. Reminds me of the actual old MMO Rift. I just need to buy a ton of these repaired rift keys, which again, I'm going to cover a little bit later. And then, of course, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the dailies. The 4 covenants have made camp in Korthia, and they're going to offer a different set of dailies each day. And there's a big old bar to fill up too. Think of how Mechagon questing operated, and it's sort of like that. So most of that is familiar to all. I'm not going to talk too much more on how all that stuff works. What you get as rewards is pretty widespread though. Like there's gear, which can be upgradable up to a pretty high item level. Right now, it can be upgraded to 233, which again is fairly high. It's about a half step under heroic raid gear. You can get bonus reputation with Death's Advance, which is the new faction, or any of the other 4 9.0 reputations you're familiar with. There's gold, and there's anima too, and so far that's it. That giant big fill up the bar quest, that awards all that stuff and more, including a material called Korthium, which you can find at a low drop rate from treasures, at least that was my experience. Korthium is going to be used as a reagent to make legendaries. Korthium is also not bind on pickup, and so Korthium is going to make you gold, either as a source for making legendaries or to just make money off making legendaries or selling the material. But there's also reputation to work. There's 2 reputations actually, with a good chunk of stuff to get. I mentioned Death's Advance, and your activities are going to get you rep with them, namely, I'm talking about those daily and weekly contents. The rewards though, they're not bought with gold, but they're bought with Stygia. And Stygia drops from the Maw and not Korthia, which I find a little bit weird. I'm going to talk more on that when I start talking about how all this works together, but I know that immediately elicits like some maybe trauma, I don't know. The 2 notable rewards from the Death's Advance rep vendor include these Korthian armaments. It's catch-up gear that you can send to alt, and this does not have a rep requirement. You just blow that 1000 Stygia, and then there you go. So it looks like, it also looks like the item level of these pieces is in the low 200 range, if not a fixed value, so this is a pretty nice Stygia dump to consider. There's also this Vault Anima tracker, which I guess is a sort of anima income upgrade for the Maw. And the rest are your usual fare of cosmetics and pets and mounts, and this time an ensemble, and they're pretty cool. The other reputation though, it's a doozy in its current form, so another reminder, this is a very early look. It's called the Archivist Codex. It pretends to be an object, but it's actually just, another reputation with a different name, clever. To unlock it, there's a quest line to find what are relic fragments out in Korthia. And so far they drop from rares and treasures and a really low chance from mobs, but I'll talk a little bit more on that in just a bit. And in this intro quest, I needed to farm 150 of those things. So it took me like 3 hours, approximately 3 hours to get all 150. Unfortunately, I couldn't progress any further than this quest because, well, the quest afterwards bugged out. So imagine how happy I was when that happened. In fact, I even made a newly copied character and I did the quest again and it still bugged out. So I was having a great day. Anyway, before I get into what this reputation is about, I want to try getting this thought into your head. This reputation, what I'm about to present to you, is recommended primarily for players who do not raid or PvP or run dungeons. Alright, so I'm going to circle back to this and carry on for a bit, but keep that in mind as I fill you in. The Archivist Codex is a loop of basically scouring the land for this currency, these relic fragments. As you pick up these fragments, you turn them in, and that is basically your reputation. One relic fragment equals 1 rep point. I'm not going to rail into the numbers quite yet because this is a really early look, but like it took me hours to get just 150 relics, but I needed 3,000 relics to get to the next rep level. And by the way, this is the equivalent of unfriendly, by the way, not neutral. And you need the next reputation level to buy anything. So yeah, I'm not paying any mind to the numbers right now. When you have these relic fragments, you don't spend it like a currency. You turn it in to an NPC and then he or it gives you a currency. So I turned mine in and I got 150 of this research, and then I spend that on upgrades and other stuff. It sounds infuriating to you, right? Like, ew, there's like double currencies, but there's more to it that helps it make some sense. Like as you rep up, you get access to these upgrades that you can purchase with research, but when you strip it all down, it works pretty much the same way as, you know, progressive talent trees that we've seen in Horrific Visions, The Deaths of Chromie, and in Torghast, the Box of Many Things. It's really weird. And I know that people are going to trash on it just because it looks confusing. Like it's easier to hate something you don't understand. I think that's an X-Men reference. Fortunately, we can look at the vendor that sells these items and upgrades, and it gives a lot of the context as to what our motivations are going to be. So the first thing that you can buy is this thing that lets you see what mobs are carrying fragments. And thank freaking goodness, because I thought these dropped randomly from regular mobs. Like I was doing my best to find a pattern of which mobs drop these things, and apparently it's intentionally random. So cool, having this item will make me a more effective hunter of stuff. This vendor sells keys, and there are chests dotted around Korthia that do need a key. Whether it's worth the cost of buying this key, I'm not too sure. There are repair kits to access new places, so think of Mechagon and like those drill things or those things that you build, but you just do it by yourself, and this will lead you to more of those relics for research. There's a rift key, and like I mentioned, there are rifts that are dotted in numerous places in the zone. I don't know what's in there, but I have passed by mobs that are not even targetable. I presume that I need to jump into these rifts and then see like this other side of Korthia and then fight bad guys for a few minutes. There's a crafting recipe for armor crafters to make higher level blues. This is when your archive gets to tier 4, which is the equivalent of honored reputation, and here's when things are supposed to speed up. When you pick up this research report upgrade, your relic to research conversion will no longer be a 1-to-1, it'll be more like a 1 to 1.5, meaning turning in 100 relics will equate to 150 research. It's more stuff, but again, let's not pay too much attention to the numbers because that sounds really pitiful. There are other upgrades that get you a little pittance of Stygia when killing rares and doing quests. The rep level after that scores you more of this research bonus, you get more places to farm it, and more anima to boot. And then at the highest reputation, the pretty much exalted rep, there are reputation buffs. There's the random conduit upgrade thing that you're familiar from the Maw, the thing to socket gear, same thing, and the highest upgrade levels possible for the gear that drops here and in the Maw. And upgrading gear, by the way, it does require this same research currency. But once you get a high enough reputation, I have a feeling that depending on who you are, you might be swimming in this stuff. So through my testing, I've seen a few armor pieces, as well as a trinket and a shield. So I'm going to take a stab at it and carefully presume, that this upgradable gear comes in every slot type. I like to think that I have two perspectives on this, and I'm going to talk from the solo slash the casual level first. I think this is pretty cool so far. Like when I log in, there is a zone to play in with Korthia. There's meaning to almost everything that I'm doing here. Like I'm doing dailies, and in the meantime, I'm hunting for relics. I'm going for treasures. I'm killing rares so I can get stuff. Most importantly, it's a path to power progression, unlike in 9.0. Slowly but surely, as I obtain more research, I can access these higher tiers of upgrades and more tools, and the zone sort of opens up more. One concern that I have is how this is going to shape up compared to like the world quest reward upgrades that I know we're going to get via renown. My hopes are that even with the highest renown upgrade thing that makes your world quest rewards the highest that it can be, that it's still going to be reasonably lower than this upgradable gear from Korthia. Otherwise, world quest will outpace Korthia and everyone's going to feel bad. A small gripe that I have though is that the zone itself is pretty small, and I know it's very dense. I just haven't opened everything up. I should also talk about the Maw though. The Maw had all of its inconveniences stripped away too, and for the most part it's just a place to farm for Stygia once I'm done farming for relics. And that way I can kit myself out with all of that upgradable gear that I'm still missing. I can do the Covenant Assault and even farm some anima. I do find it a little bit weird that in order to buy the cool stuff from the Reputation in Korthia, I have to leave Korthia. At the same time, farming Stygia isn't bottlenecked anymore, apart from, you know, if you've like killed and looted everything there for the day. I guess for the casual in me, 9.1 gives me Korthia and the Maw 2.0. I get this kind of loop playground with a little bit of awkwardness in the loops, but it's still very rewarding, and it fills the sort of progression that Shadowlands 9.0 was missing. Think of other patch features like the Molten Front, or maybe Thunder Isle and Quelled Nos, and you get lots of stuff for people outside of the big three to do, and they get stuff for it. Now, as an AOTC raider and an amateur dungeon running person, I gotta look at Korthia more strategically and decide where my time is best going to be spent. Progressing through the Death's Advanced Rep is kind of automatic. I'm going to be doing it, but I have a hard time buying into the Archivist Codex. That reputation kind of loops back into Korthia, meaning I got to spend a lot of time there when I could, you know, raid and do dungeons and get gear upgrades way faster. But that's not to say that Korthia is a total waste of time either. I just don't see myself going all in farming 26 hours a day at the start. I'm going to consider Korthia as the secondary activity, the thing to do when I'm not raiding or doing dungeons or whatever. The long-term goals would lie with the conduit and the socket upgrades, no doubt. Like I saw some folks on the internet wise up to that as well, and they're understandably upset that they're going to be forced to work this rep for said upgrades. But we're also going to go through the motions of probably seeing conduit upgrades from world quests and dungeons and raids, so there's a point during the season when it's a good idea to start your conduit upgrade farming. But there's a point before that, a big point before that, where it's just a really stupid idea to start conduit farming. Same thought applies to the socket and the gear upgrades. Like, they'll be nice once I have my best and slot gear to socket, but not before that. And the gear upgrades would be nice to have in case I had holes to fill, but I have a feeling that it's going to be underutilized for people who raid and do dungeons. In short, I know I'm going to get some flaming in the comments, but raiders and PvPers, they're not going to have to worry too much about Korthia as a source of upgrades until well into Season 2, and the current discourse is just way overblown. I'm counting on it, but I still want to point out that the costs of relic income had better be adjusted, otherwise people are going to respond very, very poorly to that archive reputation. I think overall though, we have a pretty cool zone to supplement the Maw 2.0 and Torghast and the existing 9.0 content. And that's going to be enough of my rambling. I hope that this information was fairly useful. If you've got questions or anything, feel free to chime in, like the video too, subscribe to the channel, and that's going to be it from me. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.